Welcome to History Lessons with me, Annalise Busemer. Today we're taking a look at the 1919 telephone strikes. Despite many other workers and companies involved in the general strike wave, the telephone strikes of 1919 were crucial in progressing both civil rights and technology. They helped improve labor laws in the country, kick-started the women's rights campaigns, and inadvertently caused the invention of the dial telephone.
Wait, but what does any of this have to do with telephone operators?
Well, to understand that, we'll have to start with the basics. First, we need to answer this important question. What is a telephone operator? Back in the 1910s, telephone calls had to be connected by a real person. These workers, mostly young women due to the fact that young men were found to be rude to clients, would answer the call,
Number, please?
425.
and then connect it to the correct line so that you could talk to your great Aunt Sally.
Hey, Aunt Sally, how you been?
In 1910, there were 88,000 female telephone operators in the United States. By 1920, there were 178,000, and by 1930, 235,000. Despite what you may think, being a telephone operator was a lot harder than it looks. The job required highly specific tests to make sure that your body could even fit into the cramped spaces they worked in. You couldn't talk to your coworkers, and were never allowed to talk to customers in any other tone than polite. And if you messed up, you'd be put in detention like a child. All of this grueling work for barely any reward. These women got paid very little.
So what did they do about it?
They went on strike. These brave women refused to work until they received better working environments and a fair wage.
Well, why did they even need to strike in the first place?
For that one, we need to know a little bit about the world during this time. First off, the telephone strikes were part of a much larger wave of strikes that happened that year, known as the General Strike Wave. After World War I, the economy was not doing so great. From 1915 to 1919, the cost of living almost doubled in the U.S. There was also a lot of political tension surrounding the Russian Revolution. It is even believed that this overall wave of strikes was speculated to have played a role in the emergence and intensity of the first Red Scare.
Wait, what does any of this have to do with civil rights or technology?
Well, young man, I'll tell you. This is Julia O'Connor. After briefly working as an operator, she realized how awful it was. She was able to organize an IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, telephone operator department for the largely female operator constituency, and within 5 months had recruited over 200 workers to join this new organization. She became president of the Operators Union, and when she was approached by other male labor leaders, she was told to
Maintain self-control and give opportunities to those who are in a position to bring about an honorable adjustment.
basically telling her to stop and leave room for men to fight for their rights instead. She did not like that. After previously failing to negotiate a new contract, the telephone workers went on strike and completely shut down the telephones of the East Coast. This led to great success, and a new contract was signed with the New England Telephone Company for better working conditions and fair wages. This is Florence Luscombe. She was very active in women's rights campaigns and the labor unions during this time.
How do you think the public reacted to the telephone strikes?
Well, people generally act accordingly, as it means any difficulty for them.
Thank you.
People like O'Connor and Luscombe were very important pieces of this larger puzzle. They contributed to events which acted as a catalyst for things like women's suffrage, finally proving to the public that women have a voice, and labor movements that helped current labor laws be set into place. We must also discuss the effect that this had on the public at the time. One of the reasons why these strikes were such an impactful moment in history is because of the sheer amount of chaos they caused. In the 1910s, there was no internet, there were no private telephones, and much of business and day-to-day life relied on the telephone services to operate. So when there were no more people left to connect your calls, obviously no calls could be made. People over the country were freaking out over this, and the press was doing its best to address this issue.
New England, the conservative, has developed a brand new twist to an economic problem, a strike of telephone employees, wholly paralyzing or seriously crippling telephone services over wide areas.
The public was also pissed at the government for allowing this to happen. From Maine,
We fail to understand how a responsible government or management of such a tremendous public-serving industry could permit such a situation to arise. And yet, perhaps in view of the other potable examples of government control and management before us, we should not wonder.
being able to see the mass amounts of trouble caused by these striking women allows us to see the exact moment when labor efforts and women's rights were changed forever. However, these were not the only outcomes of the strikes. Due to the fact that no one was there to connect calls, people began to fiddle around with these phones and eventually invented the dial telephone, which which is one of the most important technological advancements for decades and allowed people to make calls to others from the privacy of their own home, and no operators were required, making this process a whole lot faster.
Okay, well, that's great and all, but what about all the other strikes you said were happening? What did they do?
Yes, young man, you are 100% right. There are many other labor strikes during this time.
So why haven't you talked about them? Did they just sit there or something?
No, of course not. Well, yes, there were other strikes, and yes, they did do much good for the country. It can be argued that the telephone strikes were the most impactful.
Okay, well, why do I need to know any of this? Why should I care?
These brave young women had an impact on your life as well.
They have? How?
They fought for their rights so that you could have yours. Because they won the right to have better pay and fair working conditions, they progressed the labor movements by quite a bit, which means that when you get a job, you get to have fair hours and fair pay. Same goes for women's rights. They may not have been specifically campaigning for women's suffrage, but they were showing the world it could be done. That women also deserve the same working rights as men, or any human being, honestly. And they may not have meant to, but they also made it so that you can call your friends and play Fortnite every day.
Yeah! Fortnite!
These young ladies were truly a key piece in shaping America to be what it is today.